Hey everybody, welcome to UCB on Mission. It's great to have you all join us this Thursday afternoon. We have a very special episode today for you. What is UCB on Mission? UCB on Mission is a space in which we as a church can interact and talk about how COVID-19 crisis is changing our lives as we know it. We're bringing in a few UCB people to interact with who are on mission, who are representing Christ and his church and our church on mission in creative ways. We're doing this so that you will learn the stories of your fellow UCBers. We're doing this so that you will feel some of the things that they are feeling, so that you'll know how to pray, and so that you too will be inspired to go on mission during these difficult times. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce our special guest this afternoon. We have Dr. Arley Gómez with us. Arley, I've got you pulled up here. You are live, and if you'll unmute your mic. Arley, will you introduce yourself? Tell us where you're from. Tell us what you studied and a little bit about your family.
Oh, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me here. I send a big regards to the whole members of the church, and I hope the Lord will light us how to proceed, not only today, but exactly with this situation. Regarding to myself, I'm a biologist, chemist, and medical doctor. I'm a master in molecular biology and biotechnology. I hold a PhD in infectious diseases from Brussels University. And then I did a postdoc in nanotechnology applied to medicine in Karolinska Institute in Stockholm. Actually, I'm a research director in the Fundación Universitaria de Ciencias de la Salud, who is the biggest health university in Colombia in terms that we train about 50 different specialties. We have residents, about 700 residents from pediatrics, internal medicine, infectious disease, and some other specialties. And I'm in charge of heading the research in different fields: epidemiological, clinical, and molecular.
Okay, so if I just heard you correctly, Arley, you've got a bachelor's, you've got a master's, or maybe a few masters, you have a PhD, an MD, and a postdoc. How many years did all of that take you, all your studying?
Well, it's about 25 years.
Yes, and so I am not a scientist. In fact, I went to university to study pharmacy at Campbell University because I thought I wanted to be a pharmacist. In my first semester, I realized that I am much better at people than I am the periodic table of elements. So you'll forgive me if I have to ask very simple questions to understand what you're saying. But from the bio that you just gave us, it sounds like God has had a really unique plan for you, and you are just the right person with just the right training at just the right time to be leading our country in a crisis like this.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Well, one of my self-questions these days are, Lord, let me how to understand how can I be a server for you in this situation. You're right, now there is a field that we call translational medicine. It means that you go from the patient into the clinics, and then you come up with equations to do research, even into the molecular level, even into the atomic level, and try to find out the solutions and apply them to the health situation. And this is the really very clear situation in which pandemic can be solved by, I think, translational approach. Why? Because as I will mention in the few slides that I prepare for the people, is that we need to understand from different perspectives. If you realize that really overwhelming states, presidents, health ministers, scientists, everybody, it's really something that no president we have before about it. So we need to be humble and recognize that with the top of the science, cutting edge technology, let's say, we are working like almost empirical times. So if we realize this, there are no experts really on the field that can tackle the situation in an easy way. But what we have is the knowledge to understand and to read every week the situation, to learn and how to solve it.
Yeah, you described this before we started our call as real-time epidemiology, where you're gathering data, analyzing, deploying, and that's fascinating. Would you? I know you've got some materials prepared for us. Would you go ahead and just talk us through some of the things that you've been presenting to the government? I know you presented this to the Army yesterday. Walk us through some of the things that you're learning and some of the guidance from your perspective.
Okay, how you might see my presentation from here. I will start to share my screen. Is it working now, please?
Almost. Here we go.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay, so I named this virus like an enemy, a known enemy. Why? Because we only know it from 3 months back in time. And in generally, with what we have is really the fastest genome sequence that we can realize there is brand new. As you can see with the arrow, there are like basically 2 strains or 2 types of the virus. At the end of the day, is the same virus. But what you can see in these color lines is how we can track the virus from every person all over the world and see how the infection has proceeded. I want to say that this virus came from the bats, and there are at least 28 different coronavirus, and bats can harbor at least 22 out of the 28. And something that is really impressive is that the size of this virus is only 50 nanometers, maximum 140 nanometers. It means that it's invisible to the human eye, to the naked eye, even invisible with a normal microscope. And you need really a microscope that can increase the size by almost 1,000,000 times just to watch them up. Then, just to say, these are the colors. When you translate that transmission, it started from China and Wuhan, as everybody knows. And now this is the picture that we have traveling everywhere, the virus. And you will see that it's almost everywhere, all over the world. Now we have some other situations that people are scared about the mutations. Don't worry about mutations. Can I tell you that it's not changing the virulence, not the power of killing the people. It's only to adapt to the every country situation. And that's the reason why you will see the behavior changing in China, then in Italy, in Spain, in USA, and in Colombia, of course. And another issue that it's important to understand is that we don't know how the immune system, how our defenses are acting against the virus. And that can be explained later on about the vaccine. I want just to call your attention in these dynamics of contagion. In the first edge of the slide, you can see the influenza virus, in which one individual that is infected with this virus can infect 1.3 people in a meeting. Then this will start in several places and it will do an exponential contamination or infection. And at the end of the day, you can have like 40 people infected from this patient. That's for cold, for the flu, normal flu. But now down there you have the coronavirus COVID-19, in which you have infected patients that normally can infect 3 patients, then in that sequence of evolution infect 9, 17, and then 10 times exposition. I mean, if you met in 10 different places people, you ended up contaminating or infecting 50,049 people. That you can really appreciate the difference in the infectivity of the virus. The virus itself is not lethal. It's the way that was adapted to the human being. And on top of that, we have different clinical features. For example, we have seen patients with 2 days only after exposure getting infected in a really going from the mild clinical feature to severe. And some others, even there are some patients that can take 37 days to develop the clinical symptoms. That's extremely different according to the viral infections. Why? Because it means that we have a wide range of at least, by average, 15 days of asymptomatic people. If you back to the Middle Age, in which the pest was killing the people, you can see a lesion on the skin of the people that you can run out of them just to avoid the contamination. In here, you can see that at least 20% of the people are asymptomatic, especially young people. So you wouldn't scare about it because they don't have a single symptom, but they are harboring a big amount of viral particles. Then we have the clinical features that has been defined. You can have, for example, in the little kids from, let's say, 0 to 10 years old, a mild disease in which even you might have not realized about fever, only a little bit of getting tired, but they became still active. Then you have, for young people, a mild disease when you don't have pneumonia, and it's occurring in 81% of the cases. But for really clinical reasons that I wouldn't explain in here, you can move and switch to severe disease. So there are some patients that go straight to difficulty in terms of respiratory, they increase the respiratory frequency, the oxygen is not coming to the lungs, and I can summarize this clinical data saying that the virus produces inflammatory storm. Why? Because the lungs react in such a way that they produce a lot of swallowing, and then on top of that, some coagulation factors made what we call intravascular coagulation into the lung and extend to the whole body. People can die in a few hours. It's impressive because when you see the patients in the units and they are apparently breathing in a difficult way, but not such a severe disease, and you can move in few hours to the critical disease in which you have a respiratory failure, you can be infected with other microorganisms, your lungs your kidney, your liver. I mean, the whole body start to have what we call a multi-organ dysfunction and failure. It occurs in 5% of the cases, and around from those patients that goes to the hospital, at least 20% develop the critical case. I have talked with several colleagues in the United States, and they say that some of these patients can stay in an intensive care unit under ventilation support for 20 days each patient. If they succeed to survive, they will have side effects that I can comment later if you wish, but at least 5% of them, they wouldn't succeed. And on top of that, there are several clinical features. Now there are people starting with intestinal symptoms, and I have seen some studies in which you can even have viral particles into the feces 10 days after release from the hospital and be negative for the virus. That is really impressive because it means that you can contaminate water and maybe you can have what we call oral contamination, oral fecal contamination. These are the curves nowadays in South America. I wouldn't go into that. Maybe we will comment. This is a paper that I sent to some of my colleagues that we wrote with a cooperation with Switzerland researchers, in which we tried to advise and warn the Colombian government about the situation on March 16. And at that very moment, we were saying that we were very skeptical that we wouldn't have that number of cases. Nevertheless, our aim was not to become predictors in terms of number, but give a kind of a picture what measure should be taken if we close the universities and schools, if we isolate people, and so on and so on. So hopefully, after I just communicate that information confidentially to the Colombian government on March 17, and later on they took control. I think that no matter being a little bit late, a little delay on taking these measures control, then they did it. And if as that the case, we don't know, maybe we will have between 28,000 cases around. Out of the 28,000, 5,720 maybe incoming to the hospitals and 1,716 coming to the intensive care unit. This is the best picture we might have in the next 2 weeks, but I'm afraid it wouldn't be the case. These are the rates actually in Colombia, in which you know that there are 55 people. Nevertheless, I wouldn't believe so much in this data because we have lacking of tests. If we really want to tackle with the control of the infections, we need to know which people are really infected. And we normally need to have daily between 15 to 20,000 sampling and results, like in Korea, between 3 and 24 hours. Our reality up to today is that we perform like 2,000 samples daily, and just a couple of hours ago, I talked with one of my colleagues in intensive care unit, and he told me it's taking 9 days to get the results. So you will see that we don't have the reality in terms of numbers. Maybe we say that we have almost 1,900. You can multiply for 30 that number, and then we can have, might be 30 to 40,000 really infected people. And normally in Colombia, we have more men than women infected, and our rate of mortality is 1.6 2016. Nevertheless, as I told you, it's like to follow up a pandemic in real time. So the real challenge will come up in 3 weeks. In the next 3 weeks, we will see how is the behavior, because as we can realize, it's challenging the health system control, how we can support them up, and for almost every country has been clearly that they need to go by themselves. We have several challenges, and updated evidence suggests that we don't have any chemotherapy, so we don't have any antiviral therapy. We don't have neither any vaccine. There are 35 vaccine candidates, as I published into the El Tiempo interview. And what we have today is that what I call the social vaccine. The social vaccine is to stay at home, the lockdown that we have in the city. And unfortunately, it's not a vaccine that lasts for so long as the people wouldn't stand for 90 days, 120 days, or longer periods of time. And not because of the economics, several reasons that you might later overview. And I have done a call for united force into the public and private health system to coordinate actions. I think that one of the successful strategies in Korea was the unity, the communication, and the discipline in a coordinated action under the leadership of the state to face this situation really in the most appropriate way. Why? Because they have had SARS, MERS, they have even a peak epidemic of coronavirus as well, so they know how to handle it better than us. In fact, they developed a test in less than 10 days. And as I told you, I can tell you what are the controls measures that we need and what is the possibilities in the near future to develop whether a medication or a vaccine. Just thank you, and I just proceed with the questions.
Thank you, Arley. I'm curious, what do you feel like the biggest priority is right now? Is it to develop a vaccine? Is it to develop effective treatment options, or is it to develop a test? Like, if you needed to invest all your resources at once, what would you invest them in?
Well, I will invest in sampling the population, because if we really knows where to track the contacts, the asymptomatic patients, we can really control which people we need to lock down and how to control them up. If we don't have that picture, we will just have a general view of the situation, but I'm afraid that if we don't have this control, we will overwhelm the health system, and we might end up with the Italy situation in which they don't afford to income the patient to the hospitals. There are not enough ventilators, and seems to be like a worldwide situations nowadays. Why? Because there are not enough ventilation systems worldwide. They are producing, but still will take some times. And at least we can avoid the number of death rate, lowering the death rate, keeping lockdown into the city. There are no formulas, successful formulas up to date, neither Europe, neither USA, not everywhere. Only the Korean, they succeed just because they have like electronic devices in which they can control uh, unfortunately controlling the private life, the place where we are located. For example, if you get with yellow flag or alarm, that means that you wouldn't move from your home. And if they see you moving, they will take you back down there or put you somewhere to avoid contaminations. Of course, if you are sick, you can maybe manage at home the situation. If it's a mild symptoms, you don't need to go to the hospital. So they are avoiding the overwhelming of the health system. And if you really became, you are tracking every day the evolution of the symptoms. So if you suddenly you became with the fever bigger than 38 or 40 degrees Celsius degrees, then an ambulance come to your home and pick you up and bring you straight into the hospital, and they will start following up, even in the case that you should come into the intensive care units. So I would spend in this very moment in sampling the patients.
Okay, that's really helpful. Dave asks on the chat, what is the capacity of the Colombian health system in terms of ICU beds and ventilators? Do you know those?
Okay, that's a good question. Actually, until 2 weeks ago, we have a number of 5,000 intensive care units, beds. More than units is the beds capacity for the whole country. And we have about 1,200 in Bogota, but now the number has been enlarged.
Okay.
And I think we can go up to 7,000 to 8,000 beds next week.
Wow. And so those 5,000 ICU beds, that's the whole country. And do each of those, is that how many ventilators we have too?
Well, that depends on the clinical symptoms of the patients, and the evolution not really changing dramatically. You might know that in USA, for example, the Afro-American population is suffering the most.
Right.
The situation, 70% of the Afro-American, well, no, I would say 70 out of the 100% of the patients belongs to the Afro-American population. Why? The explanation is that in USA they have more sensitivity for hypertension and for diabetes. On top of that, more young people are coming into the hospitals because there are a lot of obesity. It's really an epidemic also, the obesity. So if you have obesity plus hypertension plus diabetes or renal failure or cardiovascular diseases, you are more susceptible to worsen in terms of clinical symptoms.
Right. Couple more questions from the chat. By the way, everybody, please, if you have questions for Dr. Arley, type them into the live chat, and we'll try to answer as many of them as we can. You said it's going to be 3 weeks until we get a realistic picture of the impact and the spread of this virus in Colombia. I believe that is after our quarantine officially ends. I think our quarantine goes to what, the 24th of April? So this probably means we're quarantined for longer, correct?
Yes, and thank you for the question, because I think we were wrong in terms of the concept of quarantine. Why? If you back to the Bible, quarantine relate about 40 days, not 14 days. On top of that, you see, just doing a small accounts about the incubation, the clinical symptom, and then after, once the patients are recovered, they're still releasing viral particles for 2 weeks. So in really short terms, very short terms and excellent evolution of the clinical symptoms. You have 45 days periods from the beginning until the end of the what we call cure. So it means that every patient is contaminating other patients. So that's the reason why Wuhan only opened yesterday after 76 days. So we might have the same situation, and that relay also on the discipline of the people, because I'm afraid many people, especially young people, they take it like a really a cold, and they do not believe still what is the extremely difficult situation that we are having worldwide. So if there are no discipline, we have like a social situations. In Colombia, for example, I should realize that there are from people coming from Ecuador. They have 38 different, let's say, pathways through the forest to come in, not of course through the borders control. And the same situation stand in Buenaventura and Chocó, and of course we have the long, more than 2,000 kilometers from, not sorry, well, many kilometers from Venezuela. Right. So you might see that our evolution in terms of the infection will depend on the discipline of the people to stay at home.
So one of the things I hear you saying is that even after you have a negative test, you're still a risk to other people. So for example, yesterday I read in the news, there's a U.S. Senator, Rand Paul, who's also a medical doctor. He's from Kentucky. And he had a negative test a few days ago. And this post was about him putting on his scrubs and going to the hospital to help people. He is still, hypothetically, a risk to other people. Like he may still be carrying this virus even though he produced a negative test. That's what you're saying?
Yes, there are a very simple way to understand that situation is that first of all, you can get a negative result because you didn't sample properly the patient. Or you collect properly the sample and the transportation wouldn't follow up the strict rules of cold chain and whatever. So sample can be destroyed, and when you perform the test can be negative. And of course, the human mistakes that we do in a lab. So if you bear in mind, a negative result doesn't mean that you wouldn't have the virus. What it means is that it has not been detected. And one of the studies in China says that even after 14 days of recovering, clinical recovering, a negative test in a upper respiratory tract sampling, they harbor positive test in feces for 10 days more. That's really, to me, scary. Why? Because I should say also another situation that it's from that unknown enemy is that it can stand on the surface, right, like your computer on a table for 3 to 5 days, and in a wet surface like your clothes and so on, even for 14 days.
Wow.
So it means that, and I will really aware people just going for a supermarket, whenever you bring something or you call for a domicilio, please clean up everything with a solution of hypochlorite, 0.1%. It's easy to prepare. You just take the Clorox solution. You can dilute only 50 milliliters in 5 liters, and you can clean everywhere. So there are some measures that I advise you to have at home is to clean regularly the bathrooms, every surface where you're gonna have the meals and so on. And if you go out just to buy some stuff, then you need to change immediately your clothes before to come in really into your house. You need to wear the mask and, if possible, gloves and glasses and a cover on your head as well. And once you change your clothes, immediately you go straight to take a shower because you're coming from a more and more contaminated environment in the weeks to come.
Okay. This is a good segue to one of the questions our viewer asked. Olga asked about hand washing. Is it safer to do it with hot water, or does that really matter?
Well, actually, normally the recommendation is to wash your hands every 3 hours. But if you are staying at home, you are really isolated, you can wash your hands for, let's say, twice in the morning and twice in the afternoon, and for sure before to go into your bed as well. And not only your hands, I think your face, because normally I realize that even having some interviews, sometimes I have some itching, I talk my face, my nose, and I'm really contaminated. So that's the advice, just to keep on really washing your hands and your face as well.
It's really hard to change some of those habits. I read yesterday in an article published, I want to say it was in Switzerland, about proper social distancing and how that can be different for the activity that you're doing. So, for example, if I'm standing in line, the recommended 2 meters is fine. But if I'm jogging, or if I'm walking, or if I'm riding a bike and I'm in a crowd of people, the distance is a lot more expanded. Um, is there science to that? I mean, um, do we need to put more distance between ourselves and other people when we go out to the grocery store and we're walking the aisle, or we're not allowed to go out and ride the bicycle or jog, but there may be days in the future where we are allowed to get out and exercise. How much distance do we need to keep between one another?
Yes, there's a science behind these reasons why. If you see droplets is about 5 microns size. And if we talk about 1,000 smaller about the virus, it means that every small droplet can harbor at least 100 virus. But you have millions of droplets. Only when you talk aloud, for example, in a church, you are really widespreading millions of droplets. So if you multiply this, let's say a million, to do an easy account, per 200 virus particles, it means that you are just widespreading 200 million viral particles. And of course, we realize that the distance is the best way to proceed in terms of avoiding contamination. We can see also, because when you are in a hospital, the viral load from those patients are higher than the patients that are really with the mild symptoms. So every medical doctor and nurses and all the health personnel are more exposed than anybody. Why? Because they are closer, trying to help the patients or treat the patients or whatever. So we see that I'm afraid that changed our lives forever.
Yeah.
In terms that the way that we relate, we wouldn't give hugs easily, at least not for the next year. We cannot kiss each other easily. And on the other hand, we can have crowded meetings. And maybe that would stand for the church. I wouldn't be that pessimistic, but I think that I will have every week advice about it, because if we don't have a vaccine, we don't have any other solutions.
Right.
Up to now, we don't have any solutions. So what we're doing with this social vaccine that I call is just to gain some time to come up with a scientific solution that I should pray the Lord to do something like it happened with SARS and MERS. Suddenly disappears. Of course, there were control measures, not that strict as we have now with COVID-19, but talking with those Korean expertise 2 days ago, they said we had never seen a virus like this, neither SARS, neither MERS. So it will change, at least for next year, our lives and the way that we need to relate each other. And that also because if we got a vaccine, it will take, and I know that Anthony Fauci is really a very wise man. I hope the president can copy more frequently his advices because he said 18 months to get a vaccine. I'm afraid it's longer period of time because you put a vaccine for healthy people, not for sick people. And if you really are using this vaccine, you need to be accurate enough just to avoid adverse effects of vaccines. After you get everything like perfect, you need to get the authorization and the production and scaling up for the whole world population. And it wouldn't be the case because it's $1 billion investment. And I think that we need to get like a population priority for those that are more sensitive, like with the immune system and so on. So I think that it's not that short period of time the definite solutions.
Yeah, I'm curious as you read across the world. Are there promising vaccine candidates in progress
Yes,
now?
there are 35 different vaccine candidates. And the closer to any vaccine is those that are based on SARS coronavirus. So it means that from 17 years ago, they've been studied and they didn't come out with a vaccine still. So you can figure out what is the situation. But they are trying to search like a cross immune reaction, trying to advise the immune system if it works, what is the phase of the virus.
We have Laura asking some questions about hygiene and ways to sanitize things. She says, so you're talking about cleaning up everything that comes from the street. Is it safe to clean fruits and vegetables with hypochlorite directly and eat it? And then she also wonders about those of us who have pets. How can we prevent our pets from bringing the virus in from the streets to our home? Are we allowed to clean them with these solutions, or do you have recommendations about how to sanitize our pets? I can say I haven't really thought about that with my own dog, bringing her in from walks. But what would you recommend?
Well, actually, hopefully the virus, even though it's an interspecies virus, that is really another thing that from the unknown enemy that is very exotic, is that could adapt from bats to snakes and pangolins and come up to the humans. That's really impressive. But we have other coronavirus that are species specific, meaning that there are some coronavirus for cats or felines, some other for dogs, even for whales you have coronavirus, but normally it shouldn't sticky to or be infected with this human coronavirus. Normally, I said, because if you realize it's a short period of time, we know this enemy about 3 months. Even about immune system, we don't know even if we have a memory in our immune system as usual. Because when we have, for example, measles, or we have a vaccine against measles, means that you suffer once and never again.
Right.
But that is not the case. And one of the let's say, worries about vaccine dealers. Why? Because they say it might happen that we produce with $1 million investment one vaccine that only works for 3 months.
Yeah.
And then we need to, like in influenza vaccine, change the compounds and so on. So regarding to the food, my advice is, of course, don't clean it up with hypochlorite, but we can take out the cover of tomatoes or onions or whatever vegetable you have. And if you are doing a salad, for example, otherwise you need to cook it. And same stand for meat or whatever food you have. If you have a can of food like tuna or whatever, of course you just clean up the outside of that can. And for the juice, I always advise whether to use water from the commercial available containers or to boiling the water.
Okay. And what about vinegar? Does vinegar work as a cleaning solution for the outsides of foods?
Well, actually, what it's true that alcohol and Clorox, because it's an allergenous, as you know, as a pharmacist, is oxidizing the membrane of the virus, is killing the virus. But I don't know. I don't have any scientific evidence about it, so I couldn't comment.
We have a question from another viewer. Since you mentioned Dr. Fosi and some of the developments in the U.S., we've heard a little bit of talk about hydroxychloroquine. I don't know how to pronounce that because I've only read it. And Z-Packs. They wonder if that is available here in Bogota. Now I know Z-Packs are available here in Bogota, but what about the first hydroxychloroquine? And what do you feel about that? Because there's a little controversy about that in the U.S. at least.
Yes, Chinese people, they have used several tools to control and to use as a therapy. It can range from even is a gas from chlorine that has been used that is not harmful for the human health. And there's a company that are trying to develop that in Colombia from more than 10 years ago. We will perform several studies in the university about it. But they have used chloroquine. Why? Because apparently the virus is consuming the iron. And one of the functions of the hydroxychloroquine is to control that pathway, that biochemical pathway. So they found that since we don't have an antiviral therapy up to now, they are trying to use like a second effects. For example, I will mention that there's a drug called Viagra that normally has been developed for antihypertensive uses, but then they realized that it has another use and now ended up in a commercial pathway to that second use. So they're using the same example, but I'm afraid that this is not a really still significant and scientific evidence to prove that it works. Second, it has done already some devastating effects in people that are self-prescribing, and I'm afraid that happened also in Colombia. People are trying to take their pills by their own, and it's producing cardiovascular arrest, heart attacks. So they don't know the doses. So I recommend, in that case, need to be prescribed by the doctor and follow up in terms of hepatic test, liver test, renal test, and so on. It cannot be used at home or not as other antibiotics that people are using. And we can have also, I just want to take this chance to explain that from our university, we have present 12 scientific projects ranging from the epidemiological control, public health control, until nanoparticles. Myself, I and develop a project. I want to be humble in that affirmation is that I'm not developing a vaccine still. It's a proof principle from the scientific about an approach how can works nanoparticles for a treatment, but it's a long wait before we can get outcomes and results. Nevertheless, we have something really closer. Maybe you remember the story of Pasteur, in which we took blood from people that was already healed, and we call convalescent plasma. It means those people that succeed to the clinical features. We take the blood, we take the plasma sample, and we put it into the people that are in critical situations. And according to the Korean colleagues, it works really in a good way, and it's normal. It's like the human defenses that moms pass to the little baby is a passive therapy, and it works properly because you have already antibodies and some other defenses that has been effective to release the disease from those patients and can works for other. But this is all what we have. As I told you, in the time of in the era of the cutting edge technology, we're using even empirical and some other tools that we had before.
Yeah. So just so I understand what you're saying, you and your team are not working on a vaccine, rather you're working on some other treatment options. And did I understand correctly that they resemble what the Koreans were using with blood and plasma?
Yes, the point is that even that we are in an emergency situation, we cannot skip scientific rules, and we should not do it, because when you are using something with a person, you need to be aware what is the source and the efficacy and security of this compound. So we need to submit the projects, get an approval, the bioethical approval, the clinical approval. It's quite a long way before we can get an approval. But we can have that plasma use. We have another that we are trying to develop with the stem cells. It seems that stem cell works properly because it's lower the inflammation process, the inflammation store, and not only that, can recover the alveolus cells. But there are few limited studies worldwide. Nowadays, there are 8 different clinical trials in USA about it, and still standing for a good outcome. So that's the reason why I told you, be aware what is the source of information that you are using, because there are fake news everywhere. There are people trying to sell things that are, according to them, stimulators of the immune system. That is fake information. So the best you can do is just get a trustable source.
Good. We've only got about 5 more minutes, Arley. You're not just a scientist, you're a Christian. How does your faith inform your research and just your overall perspective as we come up against a crisis like this?
Well, that's a very difficult question, because I pray the Lord daily to perform whatever He knows could be a solution. It shows that science are very limited in terms of the knowledge of the Lord. And if it's happened, I don't like to understand how He did it. But if He do it just to, let's say, like to perform a self-mutation, no sense mutation of the virus to limit itself, I would say that miracle, it's wonderful. On the other hand, those days has called me to reflect about what I am doing in my life, because we don't have those proximity with the family in terms of relationships, and now we pray closer. So it's like a calling from the Lord to say, I'm the one of the honor of the universe. I rule the universe, and the same stand as the Moses and Noah time. If he can, if he will disappear and renew the earth, he can do it. But I know he's merciful and grace, and I will just give a testimony is that I've been working for 18 hours daily last 3 weeks, and I have no feeling of being exhausted. And I think it's the strength from the Lord that giving me this encourage and to understand and to work together with some other countries and colleagues and so on in an intelligent network, trying to do something. So I thank the Lord and the glory to the Lord.
Amen. Arley, how can we as a church and the people who are watching this pray for you and your team?
Oh, thank you. First of all, I think that first of all to light us, everybody, not only here but worldwide, all the scientists. This is not about only the knowledge, but interaction. Because, as I told you, something brand new to light the brain and the minds of everybody to see how we can lead this situation to a really end solution. But I call also the people to pray for the social situation, because it's good to think as a scientist and as a medical doctor, but beyond of there are people that cannot afford to get the money for milk, bread daily if they don't work. So we need to find something to help them up to that networking that support other from the church and from the city. And last but not least, I would say once I have at least 4 to 5 projects that I'm sure will be useful as a solution not only for Colombia but worldwide, I will ask if any contact, any people, any donation, any foundation, whether in USA or you can meet somewhere in the world, can help us, because we need some money, and the money from the Colombian government is very limited. And now I think it goes to assistance and social situations. Only in Bogota we have 350,000 families waiting for almost weekly support in terms of food and so on. So I think that if you can pray just not only for me but for the team and for how to get out of this situation, will be great. And the last message, I think this is a marathon. It wouldn't stop for 3 months. I think it might happen that until we get a vaccine solution, can take 2 years. Our lives will need to be re-engineering. So we need to re-engineering our way to work, but also our souls in terms of praying daily and search the Lord.
Yes. Okay. Arley, let me pray for you. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Lord in heaven, thank you so much for our brother Arley. Thank you for his team. Thank you for all the resources that you've given him and his team. Lord, we're longing for a solution. Lord, you hear your servant, a man who has more education than many of us have even lived. You hear him cry out to you for enlightenment, for himself and for the science community, Lord, for researchers. Lord, it's just a reminder that we don't trust in chariots and in horses or in lab results or our own intellect or power to heal. We trust in you, Lord. We need you, Lord, to heal. Would you please enlighten our brother? Would you please enlighten his colleagues all around the world as we fight, as we learn, as we research and deploy your resources? Lord, our brother, he is the fingers of the lordship of Jesus, the healing touch of Jesus. Would you please heal? Heal us, heal our land, Lord. Um, Lord, everything changes with this, and we need your patience and prudence and wisdom. We need you, Lord, to provide resources. We think of our needy brothers and sisters that are without income during this season, and it's such a difficult thing to decide about risking human life or restarting the economy. And Lord, we long for you to provide generously through your people. All things, all resources are your resources, Lord. Would you please open your hand and extend to those who are in need, who are worried about making ends meet during this crisis, Lord. To hear our brother talk about tireless work, 18-hour days for the last 3 weeks, Lord, we know that is from you. We know that you have been the source of his strength. Please, Lord, continue to be that. Give him rest, help him to rest efficiently, and his colleagues and his team. But do continue to energize our brother, Lord. Lord, we pray that you would indeed help us to re-engineer our lives, that we would have awareness of others who are vulnerable. Lord, re-engineer our hearts, that we would be a people who are dependent upon you, Lord. Reorient our priorities, Lord. This is a crisis in which we want to experience you. We want to experience your healing and your preservation, Lord. So reorient your people, Lord. And lastly, I pray for Arley and the resources that he and his team will need as they continue to research and develop solutions, that you would provide those generously, Lord, for your healing plan. Lord, we give you our brother. We're so proud of him. We're so thankful for him. Would you please bless the labors of his hands? In Jesus' name, amen.
I mean, thank you, Andrew.
Absolutely, Arley. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really, really thankful for you. We're proud of you, that you are part of the United Church community. Keep up the good work and know that we are praying for you, brother. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you so much and have a blessed Easter week.
Will do. God bless you, Arley.
See you.
Okay, everyone. I just want to mention a couple things before I get off here. First of all, I want to turn on my light so that you can see me. Thank you so much for joining us for UCB on Mission. Just a quick note that tomorrow we have our Good Friday service at 5:30 p.m. We're going to worship on Sunday morning at 11 a.m. And then our next UCB on Mission, we've got two for you next week. Our next UCB on Mission is with Jake Jones, who leads Waharo Ministry. It's a ministry for indigenous communities. He's going to tell us a little bit about how this crisis is impacting an already vulnerable people group in our country, and the ways that Waharo and others, some church networks, are stepping up to the challenge. So you won't want to miss that UCB on Mission Monday night at 7:30 p.m. You can check our socials. While I'm mentioning that, do spread the word about the good work that our brother Arley is doing. Like this video, feel free to share it. And if you haven't subscribed already to our channel, subscribe and turn on notifications. So thanks again for joining us. God bless you all. We'll see you tomorrow night at 5:30 for our Good Friday service.